Hello, and welcome to Introducing Me. I'm your host, Sarah. I started this podcast to get to know other people and lifestyles while discovering more about myself. Each episode, I will give a new guest a chance to discuss their background, culture, interests, or whatever they want to talk about to help increase all of our own worldviews. Today, I would like to introduce you to Mandee Bowsmith. Mandee has dedicated her career to improving HR diversity efforts. She lives authentically as a member of the LGBTQ community and an executive with ADHD. So I'm excited to have Mandee here today to talk more about her life and her career. So thank you so much, Mandee. Why don't you go ahead and tell the audience more about yourself?
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I appreciate the chance to be on the podcast. As you said, I am a human resources professional. I've spent 24 years in municipal and state government human resources. And over the course of that journey, that career journey, I've learned a lot of things about both how the sausage is made in government, which really sort of jades people who are government employees, but also about how important it is to remember that the people that work for government organizations are humans. One of the things that I recently left my last position in government and opened my own executive coaching and HR consulting firm. And the focus of that firm, the number one thrust, is putting the human back in human resources and putting humanity back in leadership. And part of that entails authentic connections with people, making the connections you make with people count, making the communication you have with people count, and understanding who people are as leaders so you can help coach them to be better leaders. In my own journey, one of the things that I found most helpful to me is there's a phrase, and I don't even have a citation for this, so I apologize out in the world. If you know who it is, you can let us know. But the phrase is, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So for me, in my own career journey, being a gay woman, being a human resources professional, being somebody who had ambitions to climb the ladder, as it were, I was very, very lucky in the first part of my career to have somebody who was also a gay woman, who was incredibly intelligent, incredibly dynamic, and who led the organization I was working for. And I could see myself in her. I could see what I wanted to be in her. And I realized that if you can't see that, if you can't see somebody like you doing the thing that you may want to do, you feel like you can't do it. And I think that that's something that's very important for people who identify as other, people who identify as different, people who identify as not, cisgendered humans. It's important to be seen, and it's important to, in my opinion, and as a human resources professional, we talk about diversity, we talk about equity, we talk about inclusion all the time. And of course, in most organizations, that's really difficult to achieve because there are a lot of people who will tell you they just want to come to work, do their job, and go home. They don't want any of this diversity mumbo jumbo. Why do I need this? I'm an accountant. I deal with numbers. I don't care if you're gay. I don't care if you're black. I don't care if you're this, right? But in order to really function as a high performing team in whatever organization you're in, the humanity piece, and you cannot separate diversity, equity, inclusion from humanity. It's all rolled into one. And being able to connect with people authentically about who they are, what they bring to a team or to an organization is really powerful. And my goal in my firm is to really promote that and really my focus is on government leaders because we do we do a really bad job of grooming leaders, of giving professional development opportunities to potential leaders so that they become people who employees want to work for and that better an organization. In government, it's typically the last old white man standing who's been there for 30 years, Maybe he's been an electrician for 30 years and suddenly they look around because they need a public works director and like, oh, you've been here the longest, you're public works director. They know nothing about supervision. They know nothing about leadership. They know nothing about budget development, organizational culture. They know nothing about, fostering high performing teams, but they've been there for 30 years. So they must know something, right? And my goal really within this is to authentically bring humanity back to HR and back to leadership, because I think that the humans we work with every day who are really the ones who accomplish the service delivery within government are the greatest asset any organization has, not just government. And we need to realize that and really capitalize on it.
So what first got you into human resources as a whole and really being and giving the opportunity for people to be their authentic selves?
What's funny is I wanted to be a rock star, but missed. And 24 years ago, I was hired at the city of Las Vegas in Nevada as a temporary file clerk in the summer. And my boss liked my work so much that she asked me to apply for a permanent position, and I did. And what's interesting is that I never really thought of it as a career. I never thought of it as something that I could build my life on. And one day I woke up and it was 15 years later and I thought, oh my gosh, I have a retirement and I have all this stuff and I've been, oh my gosh, I really need to really need to think this through. For me, the person that I was able to look up to, who I likened myself to in a position of leadership, I was able to, when I moved on to another organization, I was able to be more comfortable in saying, I'm going to be me. I'm going to be who I am at this new organization, because there are no strings, right? There's no history. There's no backstory that anybody needs to know. This is Mandee. This is me. These are my cards. Like it or lump it, right? And so when I took a new position at the city of Reno, I was just me. And I find that people relate to authenticity. They can't put their finger on what it is that they like about you when you are your authentic self, people, but they relate to you more easily and they open up more easily. And as an HR professional, you want that, right? In trying to help folks navigate disciplinary issues, or perhaps they have harassment and discrimination issues, or job performance issues, or whatever it is. In trying to help them navigate those things, you have to figure out how to connect with them. You have to figure out how to get them to tell you what's really going on. And if you are not your authentic self, people can tell. It's almost like there's an old saying about kids and dogs can tell who the genuine people are. It's kind of that thing. People, there's something, the spidey sense, I don't know, but they can tell. And I decided, I became the director of human resources at City of Reno, and I decided that I needed to choose what kind of leader I was going to be. What kind of director was I going to be? Because I had worked under some directors in my career that I disagreed with the way that they handled things. I disagreed with the way that they handled diversity, equity, and inclusion matters. And so I really had to think, how do I want to show up? What do I want to be? And the first thing I did was I really sat down and got clarity on who I am as a person and what my goal was relative to human resources and what I was doing. And so my HR philosophy is do what's right, not what's easy. Because the truth is, if it's easy in government, it probably ain't right. And so that's sort of the mantra that I worked by. And I was dedicated to being who I was, and dedicated to trying to be inclusive and trying to include all voices in the conversations about anything that related to human resources. And I learned that earned me a lot of street cred, if you will, with the employees of the organization that had felt unheard for a long time. And, I owe that to being able to see what I wanted to become, but I also owe that to being comfortable enough and confident enough to be my authentic self in that situation, and trusting that people were going to embrace me as I was.
Did you find then that by being able to be authentic, other people also started being authentic at your workplace?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting that if I had more time and the inclination, it would be something to study to see how the effect of authenticity sort of resounds. What I found was, because I was always so honest, because I was always so real with people, they were real with me. They were honest with me. One just sort of small example is at the city of Reno, I worked with 10 labor unions, and I developed good relationships with the representatives from those unions, such that I could call them up and be like, dude, your guy, you got to do something about your guy, man. Or they could call me and be like, Mandee, your department's got this wrong. We really, these conversations that you can't have unless you have a foundation of authentic understanding and trust. And it goes so far. And then your teams that you work with every day, it builds a level of trust that is so genuine, and people don't even know they're doing it. Like, people they can't even articulate that they're being more authentic with you. They're just sort of doing that emulation that we do in social situations of who's in front of us and who we're talking to. But it serves to open up conversations. It serves to have people ask questions where they wouldn't ordinarily ask questions. It serves to have people develop a different kind of integrity where if they make a mistake, they're not trying to cover up the mistake. They're trying to genuinely solve the problem. And they come to you and say, hey, boss, I made a mistake, and here's how I intend to fix it. And they trust you because you're authentic with them to say, all right, let's fix it. Let's do what we need to do. It's really an amazing, authenticity is really such an amazing, I say thing, but it's not a thing. It's, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's such an amazing way of being human. And I think, especially, in the national climate today, in terms of politics, in terms of religion, in terms of people's perceptions of other people, authenticity is something that is so sought out. We crave it. We crave genuineness, and we crave the truth, even if it's scary, even if it's a little hurtful. We just don't want to be lied to, you know. And I think that that's what earns people credit when they are truly authentic. And especially in terms of leadership, if people begin to lead more with authenticity, with who they are, and allow those around, and here's this is the big thing, allow the people around you to be their authentic selves. It's amazing what you can accomplish, because people are working automatically within their comfort zones. And they're also, because there's an element of trust, they're also more willing to step outside those comfort zones and try things that have never been done before. And it's pretty cool to watch.
So did you ever have moments when being your authentic self that, you ran into the person who's like, I don't care about DEI in the workplace. I'm just here to do my job. Why does it matter that you're gay?
Mm-hmm. Well, do you know what's funny is, yeah, so yes. Over the course of my career, I run into a lot of those people. Most recently, when I was asked the question, why does it matter if you're gay? My answer is, it doesn't. That's the thing. That's the real thing. Uh, it, I have a wife. I have 3 sons. We live a very, you know, middle class life. Here, we've been able to make a good life. My family is just like everybody else's family. It may look a little different, but we want the same things for our children. We want the same things for ourselves, and we want all of those things. We want love, we want respect, we want joy, we want happiness, we want safety, we want security, we want shelter. We want to feel as though we are valued, but we also, the diversity and inclusion to me, we want all of those things, but we also want them for everybody else, regardless of who they are, regardless of where they come from. We want them to have their own version of that, whatever that looks like. And the truth is, the fact that I'm gay is really a detail in my life. It's not something that I diminish, but it's also not something that defines who I am. I know a lot of people who are advocates, and their gayness or their otherness or their transgenderness or their personal identities, how they identify, really seem to define them as a person for a phase. It seems that there's a period of time when people come out and they feel like they need to tell everybody their story, and they do, absolutely. But there's a point where it becomes just who you are. And the authenticity part of it that I'm promoting really is, I want to get to know you. Because when I get to know you, then I will know who you are. I will naturally learn if you are a woman who identifies as a cisgendered woman, or if you are somebody who identifies as non-binary, just in the course of authentic, genuine conversation and curiosity. And that's what I advocate, is be curious with people, talk to them, but also understand that everybody is different. There are no two people alike in this world. That's both incredibly amazing and beautiful and mind-blowing, and also reassuring, right? Like, there's nobody else like you in this world. And it means that there are infinite possibilities for relationships to be formed. There are infinite possibilities for who do you want to be? Who is your authentic self? And if you don't know who your authentic self is, maybe somebody like me, who's a coach or a consultant, can help you figure out, who your authentic self is. And so that you can show up in a more comfortable way wherever you go.
So you've talked about, being your authentic self, how your identity, while part of your identity isn't necessarily like your forefront, like here it is, here's who I am. It's just part of who you are as part of natural conversation and curiosity. Regarding having ADHD, what has that been like in the workplace and being authentic? Because that, I feel like, is something in the world of neurodiversity is more being heard about now, and is kind of just starting to be more vocalized and seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things is the medical community is starting to come around to the concept that ADHD doesn't go away. Right? I was diagnosed when I was 6 years old. I am 47 years old now. I have lived with this my entire life. And while I have developed life hacks, I don't know, work hacks, ways to get around things, whatever we want to call them, it truly is, this is much more, this is much less of a detail in my life than my being gay, if that makes any sense. The ADHD or the ADD piece of me is ever present. And it's something that, while I am medicated, and I am fortunate to be medicated, and to be able to work through the issues that I have, there are a lot of people who are not medicated. They are undiagnosed. They don't understand why they feel the way they do, how they feel so badly about themselves, about, when they don't finish tasks on time, or when they can't get their homework in on time, or when they forget where their keys are for the 45th time in a row. There's nothing wrong with you as an ADD. In fact, I see it as a superpower, because my brain works in a different way than most other people's brain, and it allows me to come up with these really creative, out of left field ideas that sometimes work, believe it or not, which is really cool. But all three of my boys are ADD, and I tell them it's a superpower. Use your unique brain to, for good, not evil. As an executive, one of the fundamental, and even as a medicated executive, one of the fundamental problems that I have is with email. I hate email because it just keeps coming. You can never be done, right? It just keeps it's like triples. It just exponentially reproduces. And I have always struggled with keeping up with email, keeping up with those tasks and the expectation. That's another thing in our world, in our corporate world. There has become this expectation of instant response to email. That's not what email is intended for, right? Email replaced the memo. And back in the day when we sent memos, it would be weeks before everybody circulated the memo and people responded, right? But you send me an email and then you call me and say, Mandee, have you read my email? Well, what did you send it? Just now. Of course I didn't read your email because I have 400 ahead of yours. It's this crazy thing. And so things like email, overwhelm is a huge thing for leaders and executives and women. That's one of the other things is women with ADD are often misdiagnosed. They are also often maligned because they don't understand what's going on with their brain, and it looks like they're not working to their best potential. And perhaps they're not, right? Like, who knows? But it's often something that is misunderstood and misperceived as laziness, as inattention, as a lack of care or due respect for whatever you're doing. And that is not the case at all. In fact, most people with ADD feel very acutely their failures. And, while I am medicated and my children are medicated, I don't necessarily advocate that is the best route for everybody who has ADD. But I would say if you're somebody who's sitting out there going, why can't I just get XYZ done? Why can't I just answer this email? Or why do I hate talking on the telephone? That's another thing. I would suggest you get in touch with your primary care physician and talk to them about what that looks like for you, because you could potentially have ADD, and there could be things like dietary restrictions, lifestyle changes that could help you with those things in your life.
So because it is very common for women to be misdiagnosed or for people to go without a diagnosis or treatment, how were you able to get diagnosed so young?
So I had an amazing mother, first of all, who, she was the most amazing human on the planet. I'm sure most people think that about their mothers, but you'll just have to agree that I'm right about mine. And I had a very astute first grade teacher who, interestingly, also went to my mother to get her hair done. My mother was a hairdresser. And one day, my first grade teacher goes to get her hair done and says, your kid is killing me. Your child is acting like a crazy person in class. She's doing anything she can do to get attention. All she wants is people to, laugh at the jokes or whatever. And my mom says, well, is she doing her work? My teacher says, yes. but she's always the first one done, which means that she's always acting the fool, right? She says, I think you need to have her tested for whatever. So my mom took me to a pediatrician in Las Vegas, Nevada, who was a really well-known pediatrician, was very, very learned, and was sort of on the cutting edge of childhood disease diagnosis at the time. And she evaluated me using the tools that were available at the time and said, oh, yeah, she's got ADD. Yep. And actually medicated me with a drug at the time called Cylert, which is a close relative to Ritalin or Adderall. And, I thank God I had such an astute first grade teacher, and that my mom was all in on getting me whatever help I needed. But there's something that I think that the listeners and those who have ADD and those who think they might have ADD may struggle with. And that is, when you're diagnosed, it's an adjustment, right? To understand that your brain works differently than other people's brains. There's nothing wrong with you. So that's one of the misperceptions, is that there's something wrong with you. It's not something wrong with you. It's just that the neurons are not firing the same way that a neurotypical brain does, right? The other thing is, there's an immense shame and a lot of guilt that goes along with having something like ADD, because you feel most people who have ADD are really high-performing, high-achieving people. They're very, very intelligent. And so there's a lot of shame and guilt relative to, I'm a smart person. I should be able to do this stupid, simple task. And I can't. Why? What's wrong with me? Why am I so awful? So there's a lot of negative self-talk that occurs. There's a period of shame. I went through a couple of years of great shame because I didn't want to go to the nurse's office to get my pill every day, right? I didn't want to be different than everybody. And I learned, it took a long time for me to learn the lesson, but I learned that it was so exhausting for me to fight against my brain. And I finally went back to the doctor, got medicated, and it's been a revelation, because it allows me, how I describe this, my brain is like 1,000 television sets on a conveyor belt, and all of them are tuned to different stations, and they are all at maximum volume. They are all vying for my attention. And if I've got the medication on board, I can pick a TV and focus on the TV. So I can focus on the work TV, right? Or I can focus on the wife TV, or I can focus on the kid TV. But not being medicated, it's like ping, 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 ping. And you get these little snippets. And I don't know if you've ever talked to somebody with ADD where they'll be talking to you about something, and then they will completely flip into something else because the TV shifted. That program's gone now. Now we're on a new thing. And you're like, what just happened? I had a friend who used to say, oh my God, strap in. Okay, we're doing this. We're on the roller coaster. Strap in. But that's kind of how it feels. There's a lot of shame and guilt surrounding that. And I kind of want to, I want to put it out there for your listeners that part of your authentic self, especially if you're somebody who has ADD, is embracing your brain, embracing the superpower that is the difference in the way your brain works. Because I'll bet you that you're more creative, that you are a very interesting problem solver, and that you have a lot of imagination that's just waiting to get out. So embrace it.
So kind of switching back to this authentic self and making sure people can show up for themselves, why did you decide to start your own practice?
Well, Sarah, I got to tell you, government work, it's rough. It's rough. Being in a political environment, being an executive in a political environment is very, very difficult. And it is exceedingly difficult to maintain your authentic self in a political environment, especially when you are in a department such as HR. HR is neutral, right? We serve at the pleasure of whomever is in charge, but we also are advocates for employees and we're advocates for management. So essentially, we're neutral, right? Um, that just means that wherever the wind goes, we get blown too. But it doesn't. And so usually there are different perspectives, different philosophies about how things should run. For example, when you get a different governor, right? Perhaps you had a Democratic governor and then suddenly you have a Republican governor and they've got very different ideas about, well, diversity, equity, and inclusion, hiring, recruitment, retention, all of those things. It's really difficult to survive environments like that being your authentic self. And what happened in my case, to be perfectly honest, is my authenticity created a lot of friction in my job because I'm stubborn. And part of my authentic self is when I believe I'm right until I'm proven otherwise, I will dig in and I will fight to the death for something I believe in. And that sometimes doesn't go down well with leadership and people who disagree with you in terms of what your philosophy is or what your authentic understanding of your job is. And unfortunately, in a political environment, you serve at the mercy of the leadership. And in my case, I had long noticed in my last employment gig that human resources was perceived as, they called us inhumane resources. And it just bummed me out. It made me so sad. And so I would go out of my way to talk to employees and try to figure out what would make things better. And one of the things that I sort of discovered was that my team was not approaching the human resources situations with humanity. They were approaching them with regulations and with policy and with, right, all of the things that you're supposed to have in place, right, as a good HR department, as a good organization. But they were forgetting that they were dealing with humans. And that it's not black and white. Every situation is different. I always say HR is 1,000 shades of gray. You never get the same situation twice. You have to really listen. Everything is nuanced. You have to understand that you're dealing with a human who has thoughts and feelings and perceptions and who 9 times out of 10 feels really uncomfortable having a conversation about whatever's going on with them with an HR professional because it could lead to, who knows what. And I'm sure that in an organization like I was in, everybody had a story about their friend who went to HR and suddenly didn't work there anymore. You know what I mean? So there was a lot of cultural mistrust to fight when I was there. And it really struck me. It really struck me in terms of the team that I was leading, about how we were trying to perpetuate culture change within my little team, that we were trying to infuse the humanity back into HR. And in my own practice, in my consultation business and in my coaching business, it's really what I try to do, what I focus on, putting humanity back into these disciplines. Because it's so like common sense. What is the number one asset every organization has? They're humans. So why do we treat them as though they are not human? It makes no sense.
Did you ever consider to be an HR executive in an organization that wasn't government?
Yes. It just happened that it just so happened that the trajectory of my career over the last 24 years has been in government. I'm not opposed to going into the private sector, but I feel like, and this is going to sound a little weird, there's a lot more freedom in being a consultant and in being a coach and going into an organization that I really have no dog in the fight about success or failure. I just care about the authentic message and the humanity and helping to train people and helping to help people reach clarity on these things. It makes it much less stressful for me, you know. It also, in my opinion, makes it less stressful for the folks I'm working with because they an outside voice, being able to cite an outside voice as an expert or as a resource allows them a little more freedom to behave in the way that they're trained to in terms of the kind of training that I put on. And it's just some weird psychological thing I've learned over the years about the way that people operate. So um, I I enjoy working in the space I work in because I have a lot more freedom, and I really am able to be. I think one of the things that I put in my one of my messages to you was I'm a jeans and t-shirt leader, right? I'm like I'm not a genius like them, but like the black shirt and the jeans and the Steve Jobs, completely understand why he did that. I do that because I want to be comfortable. I don't want to worry about, you know, what does this look like? And I think that there's a new group of leaders out there who sort of feel the same way I do about image and about the way that we present ourselves. And to me, a leader is about action. A leader is about the behavior. A leader is about what they show you, not what they tell you, and not what they look like. Because I've met some leaders who I would never peg as leaders who have emerged as such. And it's like, whoa, all right, okay, cool, you know? And, one of the things about leadership that I love. There was a quote day before yesterday when I guess it was day before, maybe it was yesterday. Geez, I'm losing track of time. When we learned that President Biden was not going to continue his reelection campaign, the state representative from Maryland had a long discussion with a news pundit, and one thing he said that resonated with me was, "Good leaders make room for other leaders." Man, that's powerful. That's so powerful. Empowering people who are around you to be leaders in their own right, having the confidence in yourself and your leadership ability to mentor and to give these people the ability to be their authentic selves, especially in terms of leadership. Oh man, how powerful. How powerful.
Yes, definitely powerful words there. So what was it like stepping out on your own to start a consulting business?
Terrifying. It's so, what's I realized through the course of my whole career, I've always had a notion of what success looks like, right? In a structured organization, a hierarchical organization, you can always see what success is supposed to look like. You can always see what the next step is you're supposed to achieve. When you own your own business, you don't have that. And so, and especially when you're an ADD person owning your own business, there's a lot of I know that something should be happening right now, but I don't know exactly what that is. It's terrifying in a lot of ways. It's also liberating in a lot of ways, right? I am exceedingly fortunate. I have an office outside of the house that I go to for about 5 hours a weekday, and then I'm able to be home in the afternoon to help my kids out with, picking them up from school, schlepping them to band practice, doing, all of the extracurricular things that I couldn't do for a very long time when I had my jobby job. So I'm exceedingly fortunate. I'm still scared to death in this, my own business venture. But I've talked to a lot of people. I've made a lot of connections, and it's interesting because most people that I talk to are like, just give it some time, and you'll be surprised. You'll be surprised about what happens. Just keep doing you, keep being you, and it will come. So,
And what sort of programs and coaching do you provide to your clients?
so mostly leadership coaching, professional development, right? But I do team coaching or group coaching, as it were, to help strengthen the bonds in teams and help them become more high performing where they need to. I also provide training uh, about certain topics that I believe are related to professional development, such like being your authentic self in leadership, communication in leadership. That's something, right? Communication is such a broad term, and really distilling it down into what are your learned skills and what is an attitude, what do you bring to the table, and how can we leverage those things. I'm working with my wife and business partner on developing training courses to offer on my website that are asynchronous training that helps people sort of develop leadership skills, communication skills, and some sort of self-coaching skills that I think are really important. One of the things that I focus on in my practice is micro-coaching. And pardon me, it seems to be very effective. It's almost like the Superman pose, the psychological Superman pose when you're getting ready to go into something that's really high stress. The micro coaching is something similar, but it's a 15-minute exercise where the coach is rapid fire asking you questions to get you in the mind space to be clear. So for example, you have a huge meeting where you're delivering a presentation and you need to make sure that your audience is really getting it. The micro coaching surrounding that would be, what is your message? What are you trying to get across? Is the message the same as what you're trying to get across? How are you going to know your audience is picking up what you're putting down? How are you going to pivot if you see that you're losing people? And then how are you going to bring it home? How are you going to tie it back in so that you leave them with exactly what you want them to know and have in their minds? And then how are you going to weave your next steps into the conversation? And it forces the individual to think about the clarity. What do I really need to be saying? What is extraneous and what is clear? It's really effective, very effective.
And you mentioned earlier how in business it can happen that, just kind of the long-standing employee gets promoted to leadership, but doesn't really know about leadership. You yourself worked your way up in leadership. So where did you gain your leadership skills?
A lot of it came from trying to emulate leaders that I liked, that I identified with. Some of it came from I'm a lifelong learner. I love to read. I love to learn things. So some of it came from listening to podcasts about leadership and productivity and all these things and just trying things out. Um, I'm I also was fortunate to have a couple of bosses that were really pro professional development, whether you were aiming to be a leader or not. And I took advantage of some of those opportunities. And that brings me to one of the points that I think I'd like to make, especially surrounding civil service, and that is that we should be teaching every level of the organization leadership skills. It doesn't matter if you are an administrative assistant or an office assistant. It doesn't matter if you're a secretary or the director of the department or the governor of the state. We should be, as soon as people hit the door, we should be teaching them leadership skills. We should be teaching them communication skills. We should be teaching them empathy. We should be teaching them inclusive conversational tactics and active inquiry and active listening, because you never know You never know who's going to be the last man standing, right? But you also never know who's going to emerge as really a great leader that the organization can't do without. And if we start that process when somebody is first hired and have a culture of inclusion and education and knowledge and skill development, we're going to develop amazing leaders and amazing employees who will be key to the success of the organization.
Yes, there's a lot of good things for people to think on, to realize that training isn't necessarily there for everyone, but it would benefit everyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And at the end of all my episodes, I do ask my guests a random question. So my question for you today is, if you were given the chance, would you go see the Olympics in person?
Absolutely. I had the amazing fortune to be in London in 2012 when the Olympics were there. I was a student at Cambridge studying British archaeology, whole other tangent, but I had the opportunity to go and see some events, and I've loved the Olympics since I was a kid. It's, summer, winter. It's one of my favorite sporting events, right up there with World Cup soccer for me. And I had the opportunity to see some pretty cool things while I was in London in 2012. I would go in a heartbeat. Absolutely. And I love Paris. Paris is super fun. So I would go in a heartbeat and have a great time doing it.
All right, that brings this episode to a close. So if you would like to connect with Mandee, there will be a couple links in the description. Her website will be there if you want to connect with her and her business, and also her LinkedIn will be in the description. So if you want to see what she's posting, doing professionally, feel free to connect with her. If you would like to connect with the podcast, our website is in the description as well. It brings you to our social media. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram if you'd like to go follow those pages. It also, of course, brings you to all of our past episodes, so feel free to go check out some episodes you haven't listened to before. And if you would like to be a guest on the show and share your story, my email is in the description. That is always the best way to reach me. And if you would like to support the podcast monetarily, there is a link to do that as well. So thank you so much, Mandee, for spending time with me today, and to my listeners for taking the time out of your day to hear a new story. Until next time, bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.